Hello and welcome to Low Volume SmallFormFactor.net's podcast. My name, as always, is Joshua Ramirez, and today we are joined by James Schell. James, how you doing?
Doing good.
We're also joined by John Morrison. John Morrison, New Zealand fame. How have you been?
Busy as always.
Yes, I very much know that feeling. So we're just going to jump right into the news. I see in our notes the first thing we're going to start off with is probably among the smallest of the items that we've ever even been able to talk about, let alone report on. And John, actually, you wrote up an article on this for SFF Network. Raspberry Pi 3 Model B has launched. This is a credit card-sized device. It has, for its size at least, a pretty decent collection of I/O. As well as, I guess, sort of a serial or standard pinouts that you can attach a variety of accessories and other devices. Do you happen to know how much this thing costs?
The same price as the last generation model, so about $35 US, but that obviously depends on market. Right now, the second version is selling for 65 New Zealand, and the new model is selling for 95 in New Zealand. So depends on your market.
Gotcha. So, and for that $35, you get a fair amount. The SoC they use is the Broadcom BCM 2837 RIF, which is a heck of a lot of numbers and letters, but basically it's a 64-bit quad-core processor, I believe, running at around 1.2 gigahertz, which is probably approaching 8 to 10x the performance of the original Raspberry Pi, which says a lot. It's also got wireless, so 802.11n and Bluetooth 4.1, and then for wired networking, RJ45, so you can do Ethernet as well. I'm not sure on the power consumption of the thing. Obviously, it's pretty darn low. You just power with a USB bus. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's basically just, in terms of the interfaces and functionality, it's pretty similar to previous Raspberry Pi models. It's just all of that and then more power. But that's kind of all you could ever really ask for a device of this kind, I'd imagine.
Yeah, the Raspberry Pi is now catching up to smartphone levels of performance, so you can expect that kind of, like, you can have smartphones nowadays with 1080p screens, so you can expect this board to be a decent board for a simple home theater PC. The only issue, and a lot of people have brought this up, is they still are only putting a small amount of memory on it. So this one is, where was it? 1 gig of DDR2. I think the previous model was 512. But there are other models other competitors out on the market, and I can't remember the name offhand, but they've got 2 gigs and a faster processor included with them for around the same price. So while it's a well-known option, and that's probably the advantage of the Raspberry Pi platform, is the documentation is there and the experimentation is there. It's not the fastest you can get or the most feature-filled that you can get. And one of our listeners has brought up the Odroid, which is the example I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, so I have to say I'm really not familiar when it comes to these uber small boards that are mostly meant for kind of tinkering and projects more than anything else. I will say, and I'm going to have to I'll see if I can find this during the show and send you guys the link. But I do recall that someone built either a tablet, an e-reader, or a smartphone, and they used a Raspberry Pi, and it was like the most kludgiest, ugly thing ever. But they're mostly just doing it out of principle to demonstrate that it's technically possible to do and have like a fully open source device. I'll have to look for that. It was actually kind of entertaining to watch them build it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure it's completely open source. I do believe the Broadcom graphics driver in Linux is a closed... what's the word for it? It's a binary blob, so it's not per se open source, and a lot of the community does have an issue with that, but unfortunately the true open source options for that kind of thing very, very slow.
Yeah, I buy that. And I don't know that it's necessarily the sort of thing that would have to be, open source all the way up and down the stack anyway.
A lot of people do the open source thing the whole way up and down by principle.
Oh no, I get that. I just think
yeah.
practically speaking,
No. Especially for something that's $35 and it's basically is a Kodi or XBMC distribution for this board, and it doesn't make a half bad home theater PC by itself.
That's interesting. Yeah, and this is actually an interesting question, would be whether or not that Broadcom SoC has an encoder on die, because it's very, very typical now, even for lower end smartphones, that whatever SoC they use, they have an H.264 encoder on die to A, assist with performance, but B, usually just to save on power, because trying to do that manually just through the logic of the CPU is very, very resource intensive. Whereas if you have the encoder on the metal, it takes up some die space, but it also takes almost no energy to do that.
Yes, it does have a 1080p 30 H.264 decoder.
Oh, there you go.
On die. And it's OpenGL ES 2.0 hardware accelerated, so not exactly gaming spec, but good for video.
Yeah, a little dated, but good for anything that isn't gaming, basically.
Of course, unless it's making your own little arcade cabinet out of it, which has been done multiple times with the Raspberry Pi. I think you can actually buy kits that do it.
Oh, that's neat.
Uses a little 4-inch screen and little joystick and little buttons, and comes in a little laser cut wooden case and whatnot.
That's cute. That's very cute. All right, up next we have in the notes a link to the Steam VR test, which I'll add to the show notes. Basically, recently HTC announced the Vive and started making it available for ordering. And of course, this is the VR product that Valve has been working pretty closely with HTC on, and so they've been sort of pushing it pretty heavily on their storefront and so on and so forth. But one of the things that Valve actually published on Steam recently was the Steam VR performance test, where it analyzes your hardware and actually gives you feedback as to whether or not your desktop machine or your computer would actually be capable of playing, most games while using VR, since it's actually fairly, resource intensive. You have 2 camera viewpoints; they have to be distorted, and generally speaking, you're gonna need a very, very potent rig to be able to play much of anything, well enough on VR. So I know we challenged everyone to take this test before we started the show. I did not need to take the test before starting the show, because my only computer right now is a 2012 MacBook Pro, and I'm pretty sure I don't need to test it to know that it's going to fail that absolutely miserably. So I personally didn't bother, but I didn't know if you guys had tested at all.
No, actually, I had forgot to take it, but I mean, with Sly 980s and a 5930K, I wasn't too worried about it.
Yeah,
show off.
I anticipate that. I anticipate that you'll probably be just fine.
Yeah. I've got a single R7 360 and FX8 350, and I failed on the graphics card.
Yeah.
So I think the whole basis for this is your card and the performance test has to be able to put out, was it 120 frames per second or 90 frames per second, or
probably 90.
Average?
Well, that's
90.
That's the other thing too. It's not just all these pixels it has to push, but people's sensitivity to A, latency, and B, frame rate is incredibly heightened for VR. So that not only does that have to be high, that has to be consistently high. Like, even if you have moments where it dips below a certain threshold, it can quickly degrade the experience. So,
with any frame rate lag, you'd instantly lose the immersion.
Oh, sure. The immersiveness of the experience. So, I would encourage all of you guys to hop online and see some of the reviews for this tool that Valve has launched, the Steam VR performance test. Just reading some off the top. Truly one of the most important and influential games of all time. Recommended. Destroying dreams and wallets. Recommended.
As part of this, I would recommend that people post in the comment thread for this podcast. Let us know what your system specs are. Let us know if you passed or failed, and it'll give people sort of an indication of what you need to do to get the system to work.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And then, I know that Oculus, to their credit, they do have minimum specs for using their VR headset. But, it's also a little bit tricky because you have to bear in mind, you're going to play many games on a VR headset, and those games are going to be written differently. They're going to use different technologies. They're going to be, frankly, written by good programmers or not so good programmers. So, like, a game that might run totally fine on your hardware, there may be another game that's just going to run awfully because of the nature of the fact that games are different. So you should really kind of consider any of these recommendations more of a, like, on average, you'll be fine for certain games. But as always, people who care about maximizing performance have always had to sort of tweak settings and whatnot to get things to work smoothly on their particular hardware. And VR is, not going to be an exception to that at all.
At least the test gives you a little bit more information than the old, Windows Experience Index testing?
To this day, I can't think of a single, like, who used that?
Oh, lots of people used it. Like, because at work, I'm so glad they took Windows Experience Index out of Windows 10. I think they removed it entirely. Because, yes, I'd get people coming in all the time. It's like, I ran the test, and like I'm only getting like I don't even know what the numbers are anymore. Like they were always concerned about
if you had a mechanical drive.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of times mechanical drives would bring the score down, or like CPU or stuff. So yeah, people did care about it, but it's frustrating because it's such a simplistic test that it's really. It's just such a rough estimate that I really hated people put so much emphasis on it.
No, I completely agree. And, the sorts of people that would want that sort of data for the sake of comparing to other hardware or getting a sense of where that specific piece of hardware is at would want many different, much more sort of granular and specific and useful metrics. Whereas people who wouldn't want to use this sort of thing, then, they would be the people that wouldn't mind the oversimplification. So it's just, useless. Not helpful to any person that I can imagine. All right, so the next thing in our notes is the GTX 950 Next Gen. I was actually really excited, and the first I heard of this was reading it off of our own website. And James, actually, you wrote about this. The ASUS GTX 950 with no power plugs. I personally find this to be a big deal. I find it to be a big deal whenever you have graphics cards that have no power plugs, even if there exist other ones within the same generation that have it, just because I think it's something that I hope becomes more common. And I think that a lot of builds can really benefit from, not having to deal with cabling to power a PCI device or a graphics card when the device itself can pull enough power just through the PCI slot alone. So I didn't know if you had anything to add, but I was just really excited to read up on this.
Yeah, it is really interesting because like it was kind of frustrating when the 950 first came out because you have the 750 like its predecessor, which did not have power connectors, and then you have the 950 come out, and then now it does need power connectors. It was especially frustrating considering how much emphasis on like reduced power consumption the rest of the 900 line got, and then like the 950 then needed a 6-pin. So yeah, really great to see. Like the really odd thing though is like there's no indication of exactly how ASUS achieved this because there's been some speculation and rumors over the last couple weeks about like a new model 950, like a low power or SE or something like that. But as far as everybody can tell, this is like a full 950. It's got the same rated clock speeds. It's got the same core count. So it's kind of unusual because the normal ones usually do about 90 watts. And then so this one's like 75 or a bit under in order to not need external power. So ASUS hasn't exactly made clear like how they did this, but they did. So That's awesome, I guess.
I mean, what I would expect, or what I would guess, is that it just took them a while to do binning to find the parts that were able to maintain full specification, even when they were starved a bit for power. Is this one any more expensive or harder to get compared to the standard?
I don't think it's available yet, so I don't think they've said any word on pricing. So I don't think we know yet.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'll be curious to know. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I will be too. Yeah, and the other thing is like, so we'll have a link in the show notes, but it also, not only does it not have a power connector, like the shroud comes in a really nice like white with blue accents. Looks really nice. The problem though is that it really, really matches some of their ASUS Z170, like the signature line that have like the white with blue accents on the motherboards, but the only motherboards available in like that are ATX. They don't make any micro or mini ITX boards that have that color scheme.
Damn it.
Yeah.
It looks nice in its own right, to its defense. I was gonna comment and say like, yeah, it's not like, oh, that's amazing. That's the pinnacle of PCI design, but it's, the shroud is decent enough, and I would be fine putting it in my computer.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It does look good, but I mean, it's kind of a GTX 950 without power connectors. I mean, it does have a place, like people dropping it into like pre-built systems that have kind of junky power supplies. So there's definitely a market for that. But I mean, not having power connectors is really nice for SFF because that's one less cable you had to worry about. And then not so much this particular card because it's actually not particularly small as far as just the GPU, the card itself. But they also have a white Nano, like a Radeon Nano, which that one's super frustrating because that's like the perfect SFF card and it's white and they don't have any motherboards that match it that are small. So I mean, it was frustrating with the Nano, but now we have this too. So now we have two cards and still no appropriate SFF board to go with them. So to me, it seems like a huge oversight. Like, why bother coming out with these like cards that are of interest to the SFF form factor? Go to the trouble of making them like have like white shrouds and then not have like boards to go with them. It just doesn't make sense to me. But I don't know.
I mean, I'll take having the card and not having the platform versus having neither. But yeah, I mean, it's it's a fair point. But I mean, I'm just happy because in terms of graphics performance, we're quickly able to do so much more and more and more underneath the 75 watt threshold, which is, I believe, if I'm correct, the limit in terms of how much power a graphics card can draw from the PCI slot alone. So my hope is that as we start to see more and more of these, and you look forward to sort of next generation of graphics from both NVIDIA and AMD, the focus very much on reducing the process node, which provides lots of performance benefits. The hope is that there'll be sort of a much greater, more expanded list of options available, and that'll be not just I guess we could release this. It'll be like, no, this is an actual focus for the bottom to mid-range graphics cards we release, that you don't need any power ports at all. You literally just plug it into the board and go. Because to your point, I mean, lots of lower end builds that have power supplies that don't even have that connectivity are usually going to support that amount of power anyway. And it just, it's a massive convenience because you don't have to worry about wiring the darn thing, and you don't have to worry about clearances to make sure that fits. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And, that's just the bane of any builder's, existence, let alone a small form factor oriented one.
With the 75 watt TDP, I really hope that other board manufacturers come out with either a single slot or a low profile version of this, because that's basically the sweet spot that the 750 Ti or 750 sits in. You can do low profile or single slot, and it's perfectly capable of cooling itself. And that's the one thing we're missing from this generation from both sides, actually.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know the 750 Ti, the standard cooler that NVIDIA had for that was kind of weird insofar that it wasn't like shroud shaped. It was like a lump of metal that extended a bit beyond one slot and was just in the center of the board. I'll find a good image and throw it on the show notes. I think most people will recognize it immediately, but it looked like this like half sphere, and that was the cooler. But it because of that, the height was actually kind of large. And so, there were probably a few people that managed to find a way to do a mod to get it down to one slot, but there was like maybe an manufacturer that announced a single version of a card that was single slot for that, but it didn't really go anywhere. It was like the Galaxy or something. But
yeah, Galaxy.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about this in previous shows, how it's sort of a shame how it really doesn't seem like there's much, if any, support from AMD, Nvidia, let alone board manufacturers, on providing single slot options. It's just, there was a lot of demand for them, and it seemed to be like case manufacturers are moving towards always supporting 2 slots rather than, component manufacturers deciding to actually create single slot options. So I don't know if that's going to change. I hope it can. I hope it will, because the opportunity's there, and I think you can reasonably get a 75-watt card consistently to perform well with a single slot solution for the cooler. But whether or not manufacturers are going to decide that that's meaningful and important enough to actually design towards and manufacture, I'm not so sure. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I hope they do. I hope that we don't have to continue doing all of this work ourselves and modding and, kind of taking on the risk of potentially breaking something in the process. But the demand is pretty low, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't really see any official options from the likes of ASUS and NVIDIA and AMD throughout the rest of the year. All right, and the last bit we have for the news, and this is actually something I think we should spend a little bit of time of, because I think it's a really solid sort of conversational topic for us to have, and uniquely for us to have based on just, we're into small form factor, but we're also people that run, a forum that's dedicated to this. We post news stories. James and I have actually worked on projects related to this. In fact, actually, we've all worked on projects of some sort related to this. BitTech had this very interesting interview with the product manager for cases and cooling and such things of Corsair. And they posted this, I believe, on the 8th, so a few days ago. And, a big portion of this interview, a big bit that they sort of talked about, other than sort of the obvious stuff like some of the products they'd announced recently and whatever, BitTech made a point of asking some questions that had to do with ITX, and that sort of expanded more broadly to a conversation about the necessity of certain devices like 3.5-inch drives, and to sort of the importance or how Corsair was going to be looking to address the SFF market more generally. And so the reason that I bring this up, and I'll link to it in the show notes, I'd encourage everyone listening to find 10 minutes to read it. It really is interesting. But the reason that this is important is because, Corsair very much, at least with the SFF community, has the reputation of being the manufacturer that is by far the least efficient when it comes to the size of their enclosures and the hardware support you can get in them. I mean, the quote-unquote SFF enclosures you can get from them are total chart toppers when it comes to comparing them against the rest of the market. I mean, consistently you're getting at least a 45 liter case, and it's only going to support ITX. And yeah, maybe some of the hardware support's pretty good, but it's just a massive thing compared to what we're all used to. So, BitTech sort of made this point in some of the questions they asked, and the product manager, Michael Hooper, he had some comments that sort of inclined or at least indicated or hinted at the idea that Corsair internally is looking at ways to sort of shrink their designs, to get the volume down, to really address the small form factor market a bit better in terms of those who really are very volume conscious versus people who have 120 liter enclosures and want to get that down to 80 liter, which is sort of what Corsair is addressing right now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you guys have looked into this, but I was really curious as to what your thoughts were, A, on some of these comments that Mr. Hooper made, but B, just the idea that they're willing to have this conversation out in the open and sort of indicate, their thinking behind a lot of this, because I really didn't expect them to be as upfront about certain things as they were, to their credit.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is like, I can't find it in the interview, but I believe Michael here is like fairly new to this position. I think he was I think he was already the product manager for maybe cooling, and he's just recently moved into cases. So like, because I think it's a lot of it, his like kind of openness with the discussion is that he's not carrying over a lot of the baggage for like the responsibility for these previous designs. So he's kind of able to kind of just start from a blank slate and just kind of openly talk about it. But yeah, he makes some very good points. Like, he kind of admits that some of their designs, like especially like the 250D in particular, both weren't that space efficient, but also like just like several poor design choices that even within their own ecosystem of parts, like it was lacking. Like the biggest thing is that the side 240 millimeter mounting is only compatible with slim radiators. So like their own, I think it's the H100i GTX or GTX, whatever. They're kind of like thicker 240 rad, doesn't fit in their own case. So like he talks about how like just kind of stuff like that, where it's just kind of a lack of foresight into like what all parts people would want to put into it, kind of translated into some poor design choices that led to just very inefficient use of space. And so he talks a lot about how going forward, like he definitely, like he specifically addresses the idea that like you can't satisfy everybody's use case and have a small case. It's just not possible. You can't fit everything in the kitchen sink in something that's like a 15-liter ITX case. It's just not possible. So he talks a lot about how going forward they're going to work more towards addressing a lot of people's features like that they want, but not all of it necessarily at the same time. So like having like multiple 3.5-inch bays, but have it so that like if you're using them, you can only use a short video card, for instance. So you could have either several 3.5-inch drives or like a long GPU, but not both at the same time. So like doing things like that in order to just kind of maximize the use of the space that they have available. So I really appreciate that they're thinking that way, because it's really that's the only way to go. If you want a small case, you have to give stuff up. So in this case, or like what they're thinking of is rather than necessarily giving up tons of features, you just can't use them all at the same time. But he also makes a good point that, I mean, they're a big company, and in order to justify the expense of development, like research development and then tooling to develop a case, is that they're still going to have to appeal to like a fairly large audience. So like, from what I'm reading into this is that they're going to make a big effort into making it smaller, but I mean, I don't expect to see anything like truly tiny out of them anytime soon. Because he says that like, I think he said that as an estimate, like kind of their estimate of how big the SFF market is that I think they said like 10% of motherboard sales are mini ITX, or something like that. So it just kind of gives you an approximation of like kind of what they're having to think about in terms of like being able to market to enough people. Because if you do something like the he actually brings up the NK-SM1, which is I'm really glad that he brought it up as an example of something that's like truly space efficient. But I mean, if ITX motherboards are like 10% of motherboards sold, and then you consider people who want like something that's really small as like a sub percentage of that, and then people who are willing to spend money on like a premium case like the NK-SM1, which would be an even smaller percentage of that. I mean, you can kind of see why like it's just that market is not something a big company like Corsair can address. Like he says, I'm not sure if it's just like a real estimate or if it's just a number he threw out, but he kind of threw out that for it to be worth it, they had to sell like 100,000 cases.
You're kidding.
I think that's a kind of a high estimate, but I mean, it just kind of gives you an idea of like, I mean, the NK-SM1's only sold, I don't think we have official figures, but I'm estimating something like 3,000 units over its production.
I think closer to 5, but yeah, I mean,
I mean somewhere in there, a couple thousand. I mean, definitely less than 10,000. And that's been over the course of several years now. So you just kind of consider that. It's like as big of an influence as the M1 has. It's like, I mean, if Corsair has to sell 100,000 cases, then you can see why that they have to make design choices that appeal to a broader audience. But I do like that. Even in spite of that, though, he really sounds like he's gonna make an effort to making things that are definitely more thoughtfully designed and more space efficient. So definitely kudos to him for kind of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that attitude is going to benefit basically any of the cases, any of the products they make, right? Like, I've spent a lot of time on the show, on the forums, in conversations with people talking about how the philosophy of small form factor is not solely focused on that of reducing size, right? Like, obviously that's the major impetus for it, but behind that sort of desire to reduce size as much as possible is sort of this inclination to really spend a lot of time and energy deriving what it is you want and how much you value what you want. It's basically encouraging a high level of focus and making that decision that, look, you know, you can have everything in the kitchen sink, but you're going to be worse off for it if that's the way you approach building a computer or doing all sorts of things, versus if you're willing to have only, you know, the 5 or 6 features, if only the top 50% of things you really need and you really want and you use all the time, and you invest everything into making those things the best they can be, you're going to be way, way, way happier down the line with your build, with your product, with your state of being or what have you. You know, you'll be served way better. The things that you don't like aren't going to get in the way of the things that you do like. And it's a much better philosophy when it comes to product design and really thinking of what's the best way for us to serve customers, to serve people, to serve enthusiasts. So whether or not in Corsair's case that translates into cases that look a lot like the sort of projects you see like Encase, probably not. But at least the things that they're going to sell are going to, you know, appeal to a mass market. You know, so lots of people are going to get their hands on them or have the ability to. Probably going to hit on mid-range price points, so they're going to be a lot more affordable to a lot of people. And they're going to be a heck of a lot closer and more closely aligned with these sorts of ideals, with this philosophy, with the size range that people that have already been in small form factor for a while find to be acceptable or, you know, beneficial. And, you know, I'd imagine that for lots of people, it's going to act as a stepping stone where it's their introduction to small form factor. And then as they see, oh, I can improve further, I can do more, you know, they'll sort of know and look around and find ways and means to be introduced to the enclosures like the Encase M1, like NFC's options, you know, all of these things. So it really, to have, you know, a huge company like Corsair step in and say, we're actually going to pay attention to this now, we're actually going to try to incorporate this thinking in the way we design products, even if they're not going to the same lengths that, you know, a lot of other companies are, that's still a huge deal. I mean, this is, you know, this could have a pretty significant effect on the industry and how lots of enthusiasts are exposed to small form factor and how they really actually start to think about things, think about their builds in a way they aren't really thinking about now because they haven't had to. John, do you have any comments on this, or?
No. Yeah. You guys have pretty much covered everything, and my brain's not working properly. That, and I have less experience in the marketing and the design side of things.
Sure, but even so, I mean, you've been a customer, so you've seen what's available. You've been limited by what's available. I don't know. And in fact, if anything, that would be sort of a unique perspective to understand a bit better, because obviously James and I mean, we're deeply involved in the community. We've bought these like short run products made by enthusiasts, not by these larger companies. Like, we face these frustrations and we've addressed them head on, and we've really explored that realm. But if we're being honest with ourselves, the vast majority of people haven't. The vast majority of people that are that 10% that bought ITX, or maybe that 15% that consider themselves interested in smaller enclosures, like maybe 5 to 10% of that figure are the only ones that have really done what we've done, or are really involved or knowledgeable in that space. And everyone else has just done what everyone else does, which is they just rely on mass market. Like I want to build a new computer. All right, let's see what's on Newegg. And that's the total extent to which I'm going to research and look at what I can avail myself of. So, like what would, from that person's perspective, what is their position on this idea, on this newfound realization that Corsair is going to start thinking about how they make products differently, how they're going to start designing products catered to these smaller form factors a bit differently? And what does that mean? Why is that important? Why would I like that? Why would I not like that? Those aren't questions that maybe any of us can answer, just because that's not our world. But it's definitely something that Corsair itself has to think about, because that's their addressable market. I mean, obviously we're liking this because it's sort of them trending towards our interests, but we're a minority. Corsair has to balance this out with, trying to figure out a way to encourage lots of people who are buying cases that aren't us into sort of buying into this. As James said, 100,000 cases, that's a massive number. Even if they only need to hit half that, that's still a massive, massive number. So they have sort of this daunting task of not only bringing about these better designs and bringing out these changes, but convincing a lot of people to give them money for the privilege.
I think the thing I see here is this was all started by the whole idea of the Bitfinex Prodigy. Whereas, it wasn't small form factor, but it was still ITX. And there are quite a few people in our community who started in the Prodigy and then realized, I like this being smaller, I would like to go even smaller and smaller. From the consumer side of it, a lot of people might not be going for these smaller cases because of the limitations, but also because for what they perceive as the price, they're getting less case. So from a mass manufacturing side of things, they need to be able to produce a not quite budget, but good value for money case to bring people into this particular niche. I understand that all these indie cases, they're $200-$300, and a lot of people won't pay that for a computer case, no matter how amazing, how spectacular, how well built it is, how limited edition it is. They just want something that they can afford, and they're not paying as much for their case as they did for their ITX motherboard.
No, absolutely. And, at those sorts of price points, unless you're talking about the highest end of builds, it really isn't rational to do that, because the extra $150 you're spending on the case would go a lot further if you invested it in like a better graphics card or more memory or a better CPU or whatever. So, I mean, and to me, that's kind of the greatest news of all from all of this, is that finally, at long last, you have a major manufacturer saying this is going to be, at least in part for some of our products, a focus. And that means that you have these ideas that were sort of stuck in the high end, stuck within this niche community of people that needed to know they were around and were willing to spend a lot of extra money for it. And now those are going to become way, way more accessible, because you have this major manufacturer that's willing to invest time and money and effort to introduce these sorts of things into an enclosure that is a much lower price point, that's going to have a lot of traction, a lot of advertising, a lot of visibility in the market. It's going to be available on Newegg. People that aren't even looking for it are finally going to be introduced to this idea of, maybe you don't need a case that can do everything you might want to do. Maybe you can get by with a case that's a lot more limited, that's a lot more focused, but will do what you actually need to do a heck of a lot better because of it.
I think it'd be good to get yet another manufacturer in the market, because at the moment, we've really, in mass manufacture side of things, we've only really got Silverstone and Lian Li mass producing these smaller cases. And I mean, how many different versions of a Silverstone Sergo can you really have before someone's going to start innovating again? So yeah. I believe the SG13 is basically the 5 or the 6 or whatever it is, just with a different front panel on it.
Yeah, there's some tweaks. There's some differences in like the frame and layout and stuff. But yeah, it's very, very similar. But one interesting thing that Michael Hooper here talks about is like more... I forget the word, like just kind of making better use of like the ecosystem of like other products that Corsair makes, not just like, because like he actually specifically mentions like with the situation with like the 250D not fitting some of like Corsair's other water coolers. Like he says like previously there's not been very much like integration between the different departments. Like they are all kind of like working in their own little silos and just didn't really interact as much. So he's like, the other thing, like just kind of like, not only will like the cases like be designed kind of more thoughtfully for SFF, but also like more thoughtfully designed in mind with like other Corsair products. So he also talks about how like going forward they could maybe like make use of like their other product lines, like maybe even develop new cooling solutions or new power solutions in order to make like a different form factor feasible. Of course, this kind of all ties back into like being able to, like now you have even more expense that you have to justify. So, I mean, it's all kind of has to be balanced, but like they've already done like the SF450 and SF600 SFX power supplies, and then they have though I don't know if I'd consider it a great success, the H5SF water cooler. But it's really interesting to think about like what they could do by leveraging their position as not only a case manufacturer but also like a cooling solution manufacturer, and then also a power supply. So I'd be really interested to see if they decide to like push for maybe something a little more proprietary, but something that would let them do a really interesting case that's maybe smaller than what we would typically expect them to do.
The problem with going proprietary is you're increasing the cost of the system, because if you're using proprietary stuff like the H5SF cooler, you're limiting the amount of that being made, which is going to drive the cost up, and people are going to end up spending more on these cases, and they're not being able to upgrade them later. Like, in 3 years' time, who knows if you're going to be able to find another one of those coolers on the market that hasn't dried out, or is still, the pump bearings are still good in it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely, I mean, that's definitely the concern. So I'm really curious, like how, I mean, they may not even do anything like that proprietary, but I'd be curious because they've done it a bit with the Bulldog. I mean, the Bulldog, you can still basically use all off the shelf parts, but it's really designed around that water cooler and then having like a water cooled video card. So I don't know, it'll be interesting.
I just don't want them to end up doing an Apple and having a closed ecosystem in their cases.
No, they wouldn't, and they couldn't. I mean, it's that would not. You know, they could do this in a narrow context and probably make money.
Like the Bulldog, I can understand.
Right, but like they can't do that in a more broad fashion and say like that's the modality of how we make and build and sell things, because they just like it wouldn't scale. Like they couldn't achieve the scale that they'd need. So I wouldn't be too worried about that.
I just don't want to see a line of Corsair small form factor cases that, for water cooling, only support their H series coolers instead of supporting the 2 or 3 different radiator mounting styles and stuff like that, really.
All right, so I believe that's it for the news, and as always, we will end today's show with our favorite forum thread of the fortnight. We're adding more and more Fs every single program. And this show, the favorite thread that we stumbled on SFF Forum, and I'll add this, as always, to the show notes, is the Diesel Engine, which is an ITX small form factor console build. And honestly, I could sort of describe a lot of this, and I really wouldn't do it justice. You really just have to go and see some of the photos and all the copious notes and other things that the original poster, Chris Howell, posted on this. It's sort of a flat console-like enclosure. It uses a lot of natural materials, most notably laser cut wood, and everything from the vent patterns to the choice of materials to the construction of it is just fantastic. And he did a fair amount of prototyping as well, using paper and some other materials just to sort of get the layout down, sort of nail the proof of concept. He has lots of sketches sort of illustrating a lot of the thinking behind this, as well as sort of laying out how he's going to manufacture this. And it's just, I've been watching this one. This is one of the few threads where, like, the moment I see that there's an update to it, like I've set it for email updates, and I immediately check in to see what's going on. It's still very much in progress, but you can see some of the sort of beginnings of the parts coming together, and it's just incredibly well done. I mean, this has been really fun to watch, and you see sort of what the final state of the enclosure is supposed to look like, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm not one who likes wood or natural materials in enclosures. I just think that looks awkward and odd, but this is making me think I should make an exception.
Yeah, it does look really good, and also it's just like I love the kind of like the concept art type, like images with note, like looks like hand drawn notes on it. I guess he's got a tablet or something, but yeah, it's just really cool. Just the way he's kind of presented, like his thought process and like designing it and like the features and such. But yeah, still fairly early days. Right now, I think he's kind of just experimenting with like how the sheet metal frame's gonna be cut and bent and stuff like that. But yeah, it does look amazing. You're right. Like the wood, I'm not usually a big fan of on cases either, but here the way it's just kind of all integrated into the design, it just looks very, very sharp.
Yeah, and you look at some of these sketches, and he's actually wrapping around sort of front and sides of it is going to be brass plating, and the top and bottom portions are going to be held in with these sort of pretty prominent hex brass capped nuts. I know that to listeners who haven't seen this yet, they're probably going to think, oh, it's a steampunk build, but it's not. It's almost like Art Deco. Like it looks really nice.
It's diesel punk.
Diesel punk.
Diesel punk. It is a thing.
Really?
Yeah, it's very much the Gotham style, like Batman, the early Batman kind of thing, where it's all curved cars and kind of jazz music kind of thing, rather than steampunk. I'm very much into the style. I did build a wooden case a while ago for a contest, called it Detox. It was basically designed around an Art Deco radio. The whole thing that drew me to this case is I did a short design course when I was at uni, and just the fact, seeing the style of the design here, it takes me back to that, and being able to design by hand on paper and noting things and making changes incrementally.
Yeah, that's one thing I wish I was better at, but I basically have given up on that. So everything I do, like I'll have like really, really rough paper sketches of stuff, but then basically as soon as I start thinking seriously on a case design or something, I just have to go to the 3D model. Because like I'm really bad about not being able to just like draw perspective. So like I can draw something on paper, it's like, oh yeah, that's amazing. I can get all these parts in like 8 liters, and then like I go to the 3D, it's like, oh no, this isn't gonna work at all. So I mean, I'll only use paper just for the most basic of sketches and stuff, because I can't draw at all. So it's really fun looking at kind of like his concept sketches. It's just like I wish I could do that, but oh well.
Yeah, me too.
He's going into a massive amount of detail, like in power supply choice. It's not just, oh, it'll fit kind of thing. It's actually detailed decisions. It can support this much power. It takes up this much room. It does this to the layout of the case. And you can tell he definitely knows what he's on about when it comes to product design.
I mean, he literally has a sketch panel that is just the bracket design to hold the front I/O on the corner, 1 power button, 2 USB. It's just like, why would... Like, what? You can draw this? And he did, and it's like perfectly illustrated. It's like I can't think with that level of granularity and detail and just go like, oh, I guess it would look like this, and then sketch it out and it's beautiful. Just like, no.
A lot of that does come with experience, though. I mean, the course that I did didn't last very long in it because I can't draw. But just the amount of detail that they do teach you, and doing perspective, incremental changes, as I said, taking into account not just will it fit, you have to take into account does it work like this? Will the user be able to use this product ergonomically? Is it feasible to produce? All of these different things to consider that a lot of the time doesn't come out in 3D CAD designs in SketchUp or Blender or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in college, which was not that long ago, they had a limited run where they did literally courses focused on product design and development, and it was focused on, like, oh, you have an idea, like, let's work on how you might sketch that out. You'd iterate on drawings and whatnot, and then eventually, like, load that into a program and edit the digital version. And I tried so hard to get into that course, but every single time it was full and it conflicted with my schedule. And seeing this now and seeing just the wonderful detail, it just makes me wish more and more that I'd taken that course, because it's just really neat. It's just really neat. Like, this is how you envision in an ideal state how products are designed and made. Is this? It's that cool. All right, and with that, we are going to wrap up the show for today. My name is Joshua Ramirez, and today we were joined by James Schell and John Morrison. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Any plans for the upcoming week?
Content.
Yeah, I'm working
all
on
of the content.
A review for the Corsair SF600, so hopefully that'll be going up. Let's see. Well, by the time this gets posted, the review will probably be up. So if you're listening to this, look out for that, because it's yeah.
Have you already received that?
Oh yeah, I got it yesterday. Yeah, I've been testing it.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm excited for that review.
Yeah, it's looking good so far. I need to do some more testing. Kind of. Well, I guess the review will be out by the time people listen to this, so don't have to worry about spoiling it. But it looks really good so far. No weird noises or anything, like at the low end, like when it's off, like when the fan's off, or like, because on the Silverstone, like the 600 watt, it has some weird noises it makes because of the fan controller. Just kind of, it's really simplistic, and it basically, as the temperature increases, it increases the voltage, and then at a certain point it hits the fan's starting voltage, and so it makes kind of funny noises. But on this one, I'll need to do some more testing, but it does look like once it hits a temperature where it needs to turn the fan on, it just like gives it enough voltage for it to just kick on without any of this weird transition. I need to do a little more testing. At like when the fan's off, and then like when the fan is starting, and at kind of the lower end, it's really, really good. But at higher loads, it's definitely not exactly like quiet. So somebody expecting to run like I am, like a dual GPU rig on this at load, like really quietly, that's not really going to happen. But it's looking really promising though so far, at least for like when it's idling and stuff.
Good. And what'll you be doing this week, John?
I've got the Geek A10 review to post up. That's pretty much done and ready to go. Interesting little case. I've actually got it sitting here on my desk at the moment. I've got a few more Noctua products to review, because Noctua. And that, as well as my day job.
Yes, I was gonna say I have work.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I look forward to hearing about all of those things, both just reading the site and of course on our next show. But thank you so much for joining, and thank you listeners for listening, and we will see you next week.